te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, all by himself, Dr Gaurav Sharma is expelled from the Labour caucus, but he's not done yet, threatening more allegations and dangling the promise of proof. The capital spent the day on high alert as protesters headed to Parliament, mock trial done, and a new political party signal they're heading home again. Is abuse in state care really a thing of the past? A storm-damaged state highway means Kaitaia residents could be taking the long way round for months. Speaking of storms, Nelson is in for another dousing. And it's the aviation equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet, a limitless season ticket to fly. Yep, we'll have all the details.
RNZ News at 5. Ahi Mārie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The Labour leader says former Labour MP Gaurav Sharma may now face further disciplinary action after being kicked out of the Labour caucus earlier today. Jacinda Ardern said the now independent MP carried out repeated and calculated breaches of caucus rules. She says Labour MPs agreed unanimously to refer the matter to Labour's New Zealand Council and President Claire Szabo.
What they'll go through then is a process to determine whether or not any additional disciplinary action can be or should be taken. One of those options for them is whether or not he's expelled as a member of the party, which then affects his ability to ever run for Labour in the future.
Claire Szabo says the New Zealand Council will meet soon to decide on further action. And Dr Sharma says while he apologised to Labour MPs for breaching their trust, he also told them about his concerns. He says he talked about Labour's values and feels he wasn't treated well. He also repeated his claims that he had been bullied, which Labour denies. Dr Sharma says he hasn't decided yet whether he'll stay on in Parliament or stay as an independent MP. Around 2,000 anti-government protesters marched on Parliament today, but there was no repeat of the violence and fiery riot that ended the 23-day occupation just 6 months ago. The event was organised by the Freedoms and Rights Coalition associated with Destiny Church. Hamish Cardwell has more.
Wellingtonians were understandably anxious about the event, and some businesses near Civic Square briefly shut their doors when protesters gathered there this morning. A row of police formed a barrier between the group and a few hundred counter-protesters based at the Cenotaph just outside Parliament. Streets around the precinct were shut, and huge concrete blocks and barriers prevented access to the forecourt, although protesters were allowed onto Parliament grounds. But the event was peaceful, and police say they are happy with the behaviour of the crowd.
As mentioned, a few hundred counter-protesters also gathered in the capital. A former Horowhenua mayor, Michael Fayan, says he went to the rally as a centrist. He says he supports some ideas from both the protest and the anti-protest camps.
Far left, far right, and what about us centrists that are neither, that just want the common good for all of the people in this country? We want our democracy, we want our freedom of speech returned to us, and we want a say in how our country's led.
Michael Fayan says he was attending as an observer. The head of Oranga Tamariki is refusing to be drawn on whether sexual abuse in state facilities was systemic. The Children's Ministry is under a second day of cross-examination before the Royal Commission into Abuse in Care. Oranga Tamariki has already conceded it didn't stop abuse between 1950 and 1999 and that incidents have been significantly undercounted. Under cross-examination, Chapita Kane was asked whether sexual abuse during the period was a systemic problem.
On the basis of the information we've seen, acknowledging it will be underreported. I think we've established that over the scope period there is a large number of instances of sexual abuse.
The answer drew heckles from the public gallery. And a forensic pathologist says the bodies of 2 young children found in an abandoned storage unit earlier this month are likely to be reduced to skeletons. The police say the remains of the children, believed to be aged between 5 and 10, may have been hidden in the suitcases in Auckland for several years. Forensic Pathology South Island Clinical Director Leslie Anderson, who isn't directly involved in the case, says it could take months to identify the remains.
After multiple years, a body in a suitcase you would expect would likely be largely skeletonized. But again, it will depend a lot on the materials that are directly around the body.
Dr Anderson says investigating any death involving a child is gut-wrenching. In sport, the All Blacks' first five, Beauden Barrett, has taken a knock at training ahead of Saturday's Rugby Championship test against Argentina in Christchurch. The exact nature of the injury isn't yet known, but Barrett left training early and returned to the team's hotel to be assessed. It comes little more than 2 weeks after he escaped unscathed after falling onto his neck while trying to catch a high ball in the loss to South Africa in Mbombela. Meanwhile, Captain Sam Cane says Joe Schmidt has already stamped his mark after being elevated from an independent selector to a full-time assistant coach. Cane says they got an insight into Schmidt when he helped out before the first test against Ireland last month.
To have him in camp full-time is a real privilege. We're excited to work with him. He's already stamped his mark in a couple of areas. He'll be predominantly looking after attack and attack structure. So, yeah, we've had a few sessions in the classroom with him already, and it's good to have him on field.
Once capped Australian international India Paige Riley has been named in the Football Ferns squad for next month's matches against Mexico and the Philippines in Los Angeles. The 20-year-old forward, who plays in the Danish top league, made her lone appearance for Australia in a 5-2 loss against Germany last year. Aston Villa goalkeeper Anna Leet returns to the New Zealand squad, along with Leicester City defender CJ Bott. And tennis world number 12, American Coco Gauff, has confirmed she'll play in January's ASB Classic in Auckland. That's the news.
Protesters return to Parliament.
They don't have the same level of cause that they seemed to have last time. In fact, I'm not 100% sure of what they're actually protesting about.
Politics meets personalities.
It's giving them 2 weeks of just free rein and just he's on a mission of vengeance.
And a pop star is remembered.
Primetime Radio, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. In the west, from Northland to Wellington, also Coromandel, Taumarunui and Taupo. Partly cloudy, isolated showers north of Taupo today, spreading elsewhere tomorrow. For the Bay of Plenty, Taihape and from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Partly cloudy with isolated showers today and possible thunderstorms in Gisborne, fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with a chance of showers from the afternoon. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy with isolated showers. Rains developing in Fiordland tonight and spreading north tomorrow, heavy at times. For Canterbury, fine today apart from cloud about Banks Peninsula. Becoming cloudy tomorrow with scattered rain developing from the afternoon. For Otago and Southland, fine with high cloud today. A period of rain spreading north tomorrow morning, followed by a few showers, mainly about the coast. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, rain and low cloud today. Showers tomorrow, easing from the afternoon. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll update you we'll have news headlines, but any traffic news at about 20 past 5.
Nā mihi, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Dr Gaurav Sharma is a Labour MP no more. As expected, the Labour caucus voted to expel him over continued breaches of trust. But that's not stopped the now independent MP for Hamilton West from threatening to release more allegations as he now considers his future in Parliament. Political reporter Giles Dexter has the day's fallout.
Just 12 days ago, Dr Sharma was a little-known first-term Labour MP, accepting a petition calling for the expulsion of the Russian ambassador. Fast forward to today, and it's him that's been given the boot.
When I wrote that article on Thursday, I genuinely thought that on Friday the Prime Minister would say, well, things haven't gone right, let's do a fair investigation, and then let's see where it goes from there. That didn't happen.
For nearly 2 weeks, he's been going after his party whips, fellow MPs and the Prime Minister's office with claims of bullying and gaslighting. Not even suspension kept him quiet. He continued to name names, release secret recordings and make further allegations, all of which he hoped would result in an inquiry into his grievances. Instead, it steeled the caucus's resolve to boot him out.
Ultimately, the caucus rules do dictate that, look, in order to be able to operate together as a team, focus on the things that matter, we need to be able to trust one another. It was very clear from this decision that trust had been lost.
As he entered Parliament this morning, he said regardless of the vote, he had supporters.
I've had a minister contact me while the Prime Minister was on the podium last week, specifically saying that they've been bullied as well.
But his now former colleagues on their way in weren't so sure.
Do you trust him?
No, I don't.
He has lost my trust. I think he's been given good, fair treatment, being offered the mediation, suspension. I think it's all good stuff.
How do you engage with someone who's not willing?
As caucus decided his fate, Dr. Sharma paced back and forth outside. Then came the decision. 60 MPs voted to expel him, one opposed, while another abstained. And fittingly, it was Dr. Sharma that broke the news he was out before the party could.
The difficult bit was that, when we were in the room, nobody really wanted to talk about how we've arrived at that point.
Jacinda Ardern says it was clear Dr. Sharma no longer wanted to be a member of the caucus.
Until 12 days ago, Gaurav Sharma had friends in that caucus. Today's caucus was an expression of real sadness that we'd arrived at this point. It does not surprise me at all that there will be those who are saddened that this is what it had come to.
Labor says it now considers the matter closed. Dr. Sharma doesn't see it that way.
I did say, if I've broken people's trust, I do apologise for that. But it's come because of the fact that I haven't been treated well. I have been bullied. I have been raising concerns about my staff, not the other way around.
He still wants an investigation. Senior Labor MP David Parker says that's not going to happen.
Absolutely not. It's attention-seeking behaviour.
For now, Dr. Sharma is an independent MP, occupying a lonely space between ACT and the Greens in the House. He's tossing up whether to stay on.
That's something that I do obviously need time to think about. It's not a decision I want to hurry either way.
There's still support for him in his electorate.
I think it's disappointing, mainly because, they should have done an investigation and got all their facts right from an independent party before making a final decision.
You wonder what the Labor Party is hiding.
Whether he's honest or dishonest or whatever happened, the way they've gone about it is wrong.
Caucus also voted unanimously to refer the matter to the party council, which could take further disciplinary action.
Giles Dexter reporting there, and a little earlier I asked the expelled MP if anybody stood up for him at the caucus meeting.
No, actually they didn't, and that's what I expected as well, because if people have to message me to tell me that they're being bullied, then obviously that they don't have that trust in the party, in the caucus, and they don't want to, I guess, be made an example of like I have been.
So, if there is bullying, and you have accused the Prime Minister of an orchestrated cover-up as well, and named various colleagues as bullies, where is your evidence?
I've got the evidence. That's what I'm saying. If you want to see the evidence, I'm more than happy to show you. Obviously, I want to protect people's privacy. And, at the end of the day, these colleagues have to come out and say themselves that they've been bullied. But if you want to see the evidence, I'm happy to provide us. The screenshots have been provided. That 55-minute audio tape to News Hub was provided as well. And people clearly talk about, what they're going through. It's not a misrepresentation, as I think somebody said. It's very clear that they've mentioned the person who's bullying them, the symptoms they've got. Somebody's talked about throwing up every day, feeling, sick, coming to work, somebody asking how to fake a COVID test. All of that, it's all there. Happy to show it. And that's why I'm saying, an independent investigation means that I'm able to provide all of that evidence while keeping people's privacy intact. And those facts are presented. And then those investigators can go and talk to these people themselves and check, is that true? This is what you sent in the text. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Sharma, you have repeatedly said that you are happy to provide the evidence. We asked you to do that today, and you have declined to provide it to us.
That's not true. So you're quoting it wrong. I was in that meeting where the caucus made the decision. Since then, I've literally been in one meeting after another and then in question time. I've just walked out of question time now. So actually, when I talked to your reporter, I specifically said, happy to sit down with them. Let's book an hour or two appointment and we'll go through all the evidence. Happy to show you things as well, obviously wanting to maintain the privacy of
Can you
people
forward
involved.
that evidence to us by the close of business today, Dr. Sharma?
I'm happy for you to set an appointment with me for this week.
Okay, so you wish you want to be in control of presenting the evidence and offering some explanation that goes with it. Is it not self-explanatory?
No, well, it's not that, like it's basically, as I said, because there are people involved in it, there's privacy involved in it. Once you send these things with people's name on it, whether it's the screenshots or the emails, then it makes it harder. I just have to make sure that, people's privacy is also prevented in that. But as I said, I'm in no way saying let's not sit down or do that. So, I've got nothing to hide, happy to provide it.
Understand, Dr. Sharma, but we need to see the evidence for ourselves, not rely on others. So can I just ask you, how widespread is bullying within the Labour Party?
So, from what I've seen, what I've heard from the discussions I've had with colleagues, a lot of people have gone through it, whether you are a senior colleague, whether you are a junior colleague, whether you're a male, female, Pākehā, non-Pākehā, across the board, people have experienced it. And it's not always from the same person as well. I just want to say it's not always the same person. It's different people and different manners.
Have you ever bullied anyone, Dr. Sharma?
I haven't, and that's why I'm saying let's
Never?
do a fair investigation.
You're sure that none of your behaviour has been bullying?
No, I am very sure, and that's why I'm saying let's do an investigation on me, where I can present my facts, and anybody who's made claims can put their facts together. But
how many staff have quit your office since you've been an MP? How many staff members have left your office?
Let me ask this question to you, Lisa. How many staff have come in support of me in the last week, but media has actively not published any of those things, including staff members who were managing these other staff who have laid claim, have come out in support, but none of the media have actually wanted to talk about it. One media agency
Dr.
said,
Sharma, we're more than willing to talk to your colleagues who support you. If you wanted to provide us with a name of MPs who support you that we could talk to, we're happy to arrange to do that off air. But could you just answer me that question? How many staff have quit your office since you've been an MP, Dr. Sharma?
Since I have been an MP, staff come and go. Most people have left because we have had short-term contracts which have finished, and we have not continued the contract. Other people have left because they found a different, better job.
Just a number?
And the point I'm trying to make here is, if you want to investigate, you're basically, again, saying the same thing. You're making a judgment without even having an investigation. And how is it that after 1.5 years of it, I'm still saying, let's investigate it? I'm the one who's saying investigate it. Lawyer comes into the room, and within 30 minutes, Parliamentary Services says, there's no issues here. There's never been any staff
Dr.
issues.
Dr. Sharma,
let's
I understand that. You have explained that to us previously.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if you can provide me with a number for the number of staff who have left your office since you were
Well,
MP.
a number of staff have come and leave MP's offices.
Okay,
Prime Minister herself have said that. And most of them have left, because their term contracts were finished. They were short-term fixed contracts. They finished from one period to another, and they weren't extended any further. What I'm trying to say is, if anybody's making any accusations, whether against me or if I'm making accusations
All right, let's move on.
Else,
I just need to ask you one last thing, Dr. Sharma, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have told us those things before. When will you decide whether you're going to stay on as an independent in Parliament or not? When's your deadline for making a decision?
Well, I don't have a deadline for that. I've literally just found out the outcome of this meeting. So, it's going to take me time to reflect on these things. My question remains, will there be an independent investigation regarding the claims I've made, and an independent investigation regarding any claims that have been made against me?
And that is the now independent MP, Gaurav Sharma. It is almost 18 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Really keen to hear your thoughts on this situation. Let us know via text 2101 or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. About 2,000 anti-government protesters marched on Parliament today, but there was no repeat of the violence and fiery riot that ended the occupation earlier in the year. The event was organised by the Freedoms and Rights Coalition associated with Destiny Church, and its leader, Brian Tamaki, put himself at centre stage. Our reporter Hamish Cardwell and cameraman Samuel Rillstone were there.
Many Wellingtonians were traumatised by the shocking violence that ended the weeks-long occupation of Parliament's grounds just 6 months ago. So unsurprisingly, there was plenty of apprehension about today's event. Retail worker Harry says the protesters scared customers away.
The last time this happened down in Parliament, I got spit on, harassed a bunch of times just for wearing my mask. So I hope that doesn't happen again.
Village Goldsmith owner Ian Douglas locked his door as a precaution, with customers having to knock to be let in.
It's disruptive to business, of course, but they've got a right to protest, and as long as it's peaceful, it's not that big a disruption in terms of the whole week, the year. So yeah, it is what it is.
Protester Hiriata turned up to protest the COVID restrictions, which she says hurt her financially and emotionally. She says she lost her job as a mental health support worker because she refused to get the vaccine.
So I chose to be let go from the job. When loved ones were passed away, you weren't allowed to bury them. I experienced that with one of my cousins, so that was really hard for the family to have none of their whānau come to the tangi.
Just outside Parliament's grounds, a couple of hundred counter-protesters made their voices heard.
I think it's important. This is the city I was born in. It's important to show up and counter any kind of glimmerings of fascism whenever it rears its ugly head. And I'm really proud to see people here gathering in a loving and supportive way.
Police formed a barrier between the opposing groups, but there were some tense scenes.
You are killing yourself!
Generally, Wellingtonians we spoke to felt the authorities were much better prepared this time around. Streets around the precinct were shut, and huge concrete blocks and brand new barriers prevented access to Parliament's forecourt, although protesters were allowed onto the grounds. The self-described apostle and bishop Brian Tamaki appears to be trying to position his group, the Freedoms and Rights Coalition, to hoover up votes from other anti-government groups who are against COVID-19 public health measures and vaccine mandates. Today he announced a new party is being formed, so far comprising 3 unnamed parties, but that he won't be standing himself. Meanwhile, the government was the defendant in a mock trial for its supposed crimes against humanity. No surprise, the outcome was guilty. And with that, the crowd dispersed. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says overall she's pleased with how the day went.
Look, our hope was that we would get back to a place where we're able to have here on Parliament grounds a peaceful and lawful protest. By all accounts, it appears to have been of that nature.
The new Tamaki-aligned party now faces the incredibly difficult task, one that's bested scores of parties previously, of getting enough electoral support or nabbing an electorate seat to cross the threshold into Parliament.
And that was reporter Hamish Cardwell from Wellington there. And if you were listening on radio, you can check out the video filmed by Samuel Rillstone. We'll put that up on our webpage. It is 21 after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Coming up and away, the airline ticket that lets you fly as much as you want. Really? Yeah, no surprise though. T's and C's apply. We'll have all the details. Homai Ofakaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. The protests, the expulsion of Gaurav Sharma from Labour's caucus, anything that's on your mind, text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to get to the headlines. Ko Evi Anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. Former Labour MP Gaurav Sharma maintains that he has evidence of bullying within the Labour Party, but he's yet to share it. He told Checkpoint he'll only provide proof to an independent investigation to protect people's privacy. Dr Sharma was expelled from the caucus this morning after he repeatedly accused colleagues of lying, bullying and a cover-up, claims denied by Labour. Almost 2,000 anti-government protesters marched on Parliament today as the capital spent the day on high alert. But the event, which was organised by the Freedoms and Rights Coalition associated with Destiny Church, was peaceful, and police say they're happy with the behaviour of the crowd. Some highways in the top of the South Island aren't expected to reopen before next week. Waka Kotahi says State Highway 6 between Nelson and Blenheim and State Highway 63 through the Waido Valley must remain closed for safety reasons. And a forensic pathologist says it is gut-wrenching to investigate the death of children who are victims of foul play. The police say the bodies of 2 children may have been hidden in suitcases in an Auckland storage unit for several years. An investigation has found police were unjustified in setting a dog on 2 youths in the North Island last year. One of the pair, who were accused of stealing a vehicle, was seriously bitten by the dog. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, Milford Road on State Highway 94 has now closed from Eastgate to Westgate. The road is expected to reopen by midday tomorrow. An update will be provided by 7:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'll update you with the latest headlines and any traffic news at 5:40.
Kia ora rā, Eho. The weather's cleared up in Nelson for now, but locals face a mammoth clean-up. Traffic between Richmond and Nelson is getting more blocked up by the day, with roads closed from slips. Waka Kotahi says State Highways 6 and 63 still won't be open until next week. And the worst, well, it might not be over yet, with more heavy rain due to set in on Thursday. Our reporter Adam Burns joins us now live from Nelson. Adam, how is it looking today?
Yeah, kia ora, Lisa. I can report the sun has been out, thankfully. The rain has stopped, but people are continuing on with this massive clean-up, whether it be mud dumping or clearing up debris around people's sections. I'm on Seymour Ave, kind of the base of the Grampian Hills at the moment. I can see a massive landslip. It's about 20 feet high, if that. Earlier, I spoke to a resident in the area, Ward Carter, who's been working his socks off, meeting with geotechs, digging out the mud from his home, which has sadly been red-stickered.
Now that it's starting to dry out after a couple of days fine weather, we can start making a little bit of progress without too much more mud coming in. Hard yakka. It's very heavy and very physical, but because of the nature of the property, we can only do it by bucketful. We just can't use wheelbarrows and stuff, so yeah, it's hard yakka.
Yeah, so Ward and his family are among the hundreds of people in Nelson who've been evacuated from their homes, and he spoke of the struggle to find a long-term place of accommodation for his family.
Our insurance company's been really good about paying out emergency accommodation costs, but we're not getting a lot of outside assistance to find anything. Even the EQC or the EOC team that are trying to put people into accommodation, they're struggling to find places with vacancies that are suitable for the size families they've got.
Okay, Adam, so a massive clean-up. And what about the roads? Are they pretty blocked up?
Yeah, I noticed a marked increase of traffic on the roads today around Nelson, which follows kind of reports of heavy congestion in certain areas, which was starting to happen late yesterday. There are many road closures, of course, around the city, and of course those are two arterial state highways, 6 and 63, are still closed. Those reports of congestion are noticeable around the Stoke area, which is 15 minutes south of the central city, where a lot of the clogging of vehicles has been reported. It was fairly busy around there between 3 and 4 p.m. this afternoon. Not that I've seen it per se, but there has been reports of frustration from some motorists, with people kind of ignoring the calls from officials to stay home and avoid driving, which is a bit of a catch-22, Civil Defence are advising people to stay off the roads to ease that pressure on the battered network, but people are, wanting to restore their livelihoods. They're wanting to clear debris, of course. The Nelson City Council has also made the two bus routes 1 and 2 for at least the next fortnight to reduce that congestion. As far as the next few days, Lisa, there is more rain forecast on Thursday, as you mentioned, which I'm sure is going to keep residents and officials on high alert, considering the saturated terrain and the risk of further slips. So far from ideal, Lisa.
Really appreciate the update there, Adam. That's Adam Burns joining us live from Nelson. Imagine it, an all-you-can-fly airline ticket, the aviation equivalent of the all-you-can-eat buffet. Well, regional operator Sounds Air is making it a reality. For $799, you can fly as often as you'd like with the airline over 3 months. Joining us now is Sounds Air General Manager Andrew Crawford. Kia ora, Andrew. It sounds too good to be true. What's the catch?
Kia ora, Lisa. How are you? Well, I don't think there's too many catches. We've got 17,000 seats available, and we're trying to just get New Zealanders out and travelling this spring.
So how many of these tickets are you selling?
1,000. And we've got 17,000 seats available to fly. Now, they're not all on peak times, obviously. We're just trying to get New Zealand back moving again. But I was in the USA recently, and I really noticed how people are moving around and getting into it. And I come back to New Zealand, and we're very, very much still in our shells. And we met at management level and said, listen, we need to do something about this. We've got spare capacity. Let's get people buying a season pass the Sounds Air season pass for September, October, November, and try and get them on flights that are going maybe not full anyway.
So you say you've got 17,000 seats. Obviously, one person, one ticket, you can't fill all those spots. But conceivably, just give us a bit of an idea. How many routes do you fly? How many flights a day? How far could you get on one of these passes?
Well, you can go a long way. We fly from Wellington to Taupo in the north, Wellington to Westport, Blenheim to Christchurch, Christchurch to Wanaka. So 9 destinations, Taupo in the north, Wanaka in the south. Nelson, good time to get to Nelson. They need your support. Blenheim, obviously, Picton, Kapiti. I mean, we're New Zealand's regional carrier, and we just want to get New Zealand back flying again. People are sick of it, sick of Zoom, sick of Teams. And I noticed, as I say, when we went to the States, we were on a zero-emission journey with this airline, and we were up there looking at options for Sounds Air. We're aiming to be New Zealand's first New Zealand, but also the world's first regional carrier to fly a zero-emission flight. So
yeah, because that is the thing, isn't it, Andrew? Because people will say that Zoom and all of that palaver has given some advantages in the sense that it has cut the number of air miles in travel. So are we out of the habit of jumping on a plane?
Well, quite possibly, but I've noticed since we've got over Omicron and COVID and we're heading towards summer and winter's getting behind us, although just listen to your previous report, you wouldn't think so, but beautiful day here in Blenheim today. People do want to get out there, do want to get moving. We have a lot of demand and the planes are going. We just want to fill those extra seats up. I mean, if you thought about it, Lisa, there was $7.99 if you in the 17,000 seats, 1,000 available, so there's potential you could fly 17 times. That's $47 a seat. It's a pretty good value. Even if you only went 10 times, that's $80 a seat.
How big are your planes?
You should know that, Lisa. Flying in and out of Wellington, we've got 12-seat Cessna Caravans and 9-seat Pilatus PC-12s.
Really appreciate your time, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. That is Andrew Crawford, who's Sounds Air General Manager there. It is 5:30. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And, of course, it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa NINA, ko Nicholas Poynton, who's charged into the studio to be with us. Nicholas, weakening property market. Man, sounds like we hear that every day, isn't it? So what's it doing to Somerset's full-year profit? This is the retirement guys, right?
I realise I've set you up for failure. It's actually their half-year result, not their full-year result. But the company's bottom line halved on a year ago, down at $134.6 million. Not too much. Wouldn't sneeze at that. But that's because they haven't seen the same sort of revaluation gain in the value of their property portfolio that they saw a year ago. And that's maybe a reflection of some of the headwinds we are seeing in the property sector at the moment. But the underlying profit, which strips out those sort of one-off gains or one-off costs, that's actually increased on the year earlier. And a lot of that's on the back of better development margins and new sales demand. Now, one thing we've heard from the retirement village industry throughout the pandemic is that it caused many older New Zealanders to sort of rethink their priorities when it comes to their retirement. They said that many older New Zealanders felt isolated during the lockdowns, didn't necessarily have people visiting them and things like that. And you look at what retirement villages have to offer in terms of providing a community, people on call. They say that that's really fueled a lot of the demand they've been seeing in recent years. Another tailwind for the sector is we have an ageing population. More New Zealanders can probably expect to be in retirement villages in the years to come. So looking at Somerset's result, they also announced they've purchased 3 new properties. Like with many retirement village operators, they're always on the expansion. 2 in New Zealand, 1 in Australia. The market reacted quite favourably to this result, up about 1/3% or 4 cents to $11.59 a share.
Okay, and you also have some results from NZME.
Yes, our rivals down the road who own the New Zealand Herald, as well as the radio station News Talk ZB, have reported a much stronger half-year profit, up about 1/3 to $8.5 million. Revenue also increasing by about 2% as well. But looking under the hood of this result, how they've managed to increase their revenues, it sort of maybe speaks to the shift we're seeing in news media at the moment. They sold more advertising online and on their radio station, which has now grown to have its highest market share in 6 years. It truly is eating at everybody else's lunch, and also generated more revenue through its One Roof property publication. Red revenue, so subscriptions, that's also up. Revenue there up about 4%. Subscriptions rose from 178,000 last year to just over 200,000. About half of that is online online subscriptions as well. And maybe as a sign of the times, in-print advertising is down. It seems that advertisers want to be where the eyeballs are. That's not in your newspaper, that's on the website or on the company's app. And just looking at this result, stepping back for it, I can't help but think that this is perhaps a good thing for the news media. We hear time and time again about how this is a dying industry, blah, blah, blah. But it's encouraging to see that someone actually in the market is actually making money. Because when I see that, I sort of hope to myself, maybe that means they can hire more journalists or pay the current crop of good reporters they have maybe more money, which would be exciting. But I'm sure there'll be some people who will look at this result and think to themselves, this is a company that took about $9 million or close to over $8 million in wage subsidies, and they're also in the process of returning millions of dollars back to shareholders through dividends and share buybacks. Some people may be scratching their heads about whether or not, or how ethical that is. It raises those sorts of questions. But regardless, the market not too bullish on this result, down 3% for NZME's shares. That's when they look at their forecast advertising revenue, the current economic sort of woes we're hearing about, maybe a bit of a wobble later in their financial year. So shares down 3% to $1.22 a share.
And what numbers do you bring from the rest of the market?
NZX caught our local share market caught the chills from Wall Street, down 1% to 11,643. The dollar trading at 61.8 US cents, 89.7 Australian. And for the one texter out there who always complains if we don't include the pound,
that's
52.6 pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton there with Business News. Kaitaia residents could be taking the long way around for months after torrential rain badly damaged the main route into town, State Highway 1 through the Mangamoka Gorge. Waka Kotahi says the road is still highly unstable and there's been multiple slips with safe access an issue. That means a detour via Kirikiri on State Highway 10, and it's a hike. Andrea Panther from the Kaitaia Business Association is with us now. Kia ora, Andrea. What does it mean in terms of a trip and distance? What does it tack on?
Kia ora. It is for people living in Kaitaia or out to the west or up north, it would add on another 25 to 30 minutes. But what happens is when State Highway 1's closed for us, it sort of doubles the traffic on State Highway 10, so it adds even longer because there's more congestion on the roads. All the trucks have to go on the same road instead of coming through the gorge. And there's not that many passing places as well. So then you get angry, impatient drivers doing dangerous things as well. So it's actually it's a big roll-on effect for us. It's terrible. We're all very upset about it.
Yeah, so what are the consequences around freighting then and costs?
Yeah, so it's more kilometres and more time, so all of that adds up to money. So lots of businesses struggled with extra freight or delays in freight. The last time we had to have it closed for a year. So, those do impact lots of businesses.
And medical, because I know some people...
Oh, yep.
Yeah, some people head to Whangarei, for example. What happens with all of that?
So it's the same things. Our ambulances transport patients in between Whangarei and Kaitaia, so that's their main route to go that way. So they've got to go the longer way as well, so that adds on time to their journey. It affects everyone. Lots of people are mobile for work and travel between the different towns in the far north, and so that's impacted. People choose, they can't be bothered doing the long way, or the State Highway 10 choose not to come up, so less people spending money in the town. And then there's all the businesses that are in that south road entrance that don't have the traffic going past, and so they have significant drops in revenue as well. So there's not very many happy people in the far north at the moment.
Andrea, is there a situation where some people are sort of bizarrely caught just on the wrong side of the gorge, like in terms of access to schools and things like that?
Totally. I'm not 100% sure on the schools. I did hear, I think I read somewhere where the Mangamoka school principal had talked about it. But yes, there's definitely houses that are at the beginning of the gorge where it's closed. And so, and there's roads close to the beginning of the gorge as well, where there's lots of communities that live. So definitely there are people that are just caught, and so they've got to go an extra, like they've already got to travel 10 minutes into Kaitaia and then go the long way before they can start their journey. So definitely all of the people living south of Kaitaia are impacted even more.
So, one of our producers punched in Kaitaia into Google Maps, right, just to see what the journey time would be. And it actually told her that it would be November by the time the road was finished. What do you know about that?
I understand Waka Kotahi haven't given a time frame yet, but I've seen photos and you can tell that the damage, it looks like we've had an earthquake through there. The road has dropped and there's dangerous slips that are, so all the work they did last time, that's all fine, that's all great. So none of their work was wasted last time, but the rest of the hill has moved in lots of places and you just can't travel safely through there. It's honestly like there's been an earthquake. There's the roads.
If it's still Pakaru in the summer, what does that mean for you in terms of tourism and peak months?
Yeah, that will be incredibly detrimental to our area economically and socially. Like, this is when all our friends and whānau come and visit us because we live in the best place up here with access to beaches on both coasts, etc. So it will be incredibly detrimental to our whole area.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Andrea. Hopefully it won't take that long. That's Andrea Panther, who's from the Kaitaia Business Association there. And that's, one of the main routes, State Highway 1, bad damage in the Mongamoko Gorge. Not sure how long it's going to take to fix. It is 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program, homai or whakaaro. Interested if you're in Kaitaia and what kind of hassle is that road closure causing you. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for Evie to take it away. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. A Labour MP will be assigned to the Hamilton West electorate after Gaurav Sharma was expelled from the party's caucus. Dr Sharma was expelled from the caucus this morning after he repeatedly accused colleagues of lying, bullying and a cover-up, claims denied by Labour. The police say today's crowds have dispersed and there were no arrests or issuing of trespass orders after almost 2,000 people marched on Parliament in an anti-government protest. Around 300 counter-protesters also attended. The Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, has formally resigned this afternoon. The long-anticipated resignation has been accepted by the Governor-General. New Plymouth's Mayor says he's shocked by the tone of a letter from New Zealand cricket. It's threatening to pull stumps on first-class cricket at Pukekura Park, once voted among the 6 best cricket venues in the world, saying facilities aren't up to scratch. There have been angry protests in Buenos Aires outside the home of Argentina's Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The country's public prosecutor has asked a judge to sentence her to 12 years in jail for alleged corruption. And around 350 drivers who paid traffic fines are set to get a refund after the Wellington City Council admitted a new roading layout has been confusing. The council's writing off more than $200,000 worth of tickets. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, nothing to report on other main routes apart from in Milford. State Highway 94 has now closed because of heavy rain and snow forecast overnight into Wednesday morning. It's expected to reopen by midday tomorrow. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback. It's flooding in on the issue of Gaurav Sharma being expelled from the Labour Party caucus. This listener says, why are you giving Sharma so much time? Control freak, megalomaniac, and always wants the last word. Time waster. Tell us what you really think. Someone else says, tell Dr Sharma that he is yesterday's news. He's had his 15 minutes of fame. Ukraine is far more important. Heather says, Sharma was made for political life. He never answers a question. And this one, thanks for putting some pressure back on Sharma. The airtime he has had is entirely disproportionate to the evidence he has produced. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Oranga Tamariki has been challenged on whether abuse in state care facilities really is historic. Senior officials from the Children's Ministry were again before the Royal Commission into Abuse in Care today. They were asked about abuse in state care facilities and whether it was systemic. Jamie Tahana is at the hearing in Auckland.
For 2 years, the Royal Commission has heard survivor after survivor detail years of abuse at state facilities. It's been told of children abused while staff turned a blind eye, abusers moved to other jobs instead of being reported, staff whose criminal records were not checked, and state homes that became bywords for horror. Kohitiri, hokio, e puni, whakapākari. Responding to survivor accounts today, Oranga Tamariki Chief Executive Chapi Te Kani, with prodding from Lead Commissioner Judge Coral Shaw, said state care has been inhumane.
Can I just bring this point home a little bit, Mr. Te Kani?
Yes.
You said that some of this appeared to be violent. Would you agree that every one of these examples is completely unacceptable behaviour to any human being, let alone a child in care?
Yes, I acknowledge it. It's inhumane. Yeah,
it is humane.
It is inhumane.
Good. I just didn't want to think that you were somehow
minimising it.
Pressed on whether sexual abuse between 1950 and 1999 was a systemic problem, he replied,
"On the basis of the information we've seen, acknowledging it will be underreported. I think we've established that over the scope period. There is a large number of instances of sexual abuse."
That answer drew heckles from the public gallery. Another senior manager, Paula Attrill, says it's clear the state had devastating effects.
It wasn't just a pathway into the criminal justice system that failings in this area resulted in. It was a pathway into serious mental health difficulties, physical health difficulties, and harm across the full range of a person's being resulted from the disconnection that occurred.
The ministry has already conceded it didn't stop abuse and didn't meet the basic needs of youth between 1950 and 1999, which is the scope of the Royal Commission. But today, senior executives were quizzed on just how much has changed. Council laid out examples of stories from as recently as last year, such as a teen beaten by a staff member at a Christchurch facility. Chapi Te Kani says practices have changed significantly, with several safeguards in place.
We know of every circumstance that they've reported on. We have a number of processes in place to not only understand that, to rectify any concerns about harm.
Chapi Te Kani says all OT facilities are monitored by an advisory board and CCTV. Strip searches are banned, staff are supervised, and solitary confinement is rarely used. OT is also working with, and in some cases devolving to, iwi and whānau. Ultimately, he says he wants state care facilities closed.
We have a very clear view that the care and protection residences need to be closed down. So that is a stated organisational view. That's also the view of the government as articulated in the Future Direction Plan. We are now on the process of working out the way to do that that's safe.
The cross-examination continues tomorrow.
Jamie Tahana reporting there, and it is 14 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Scott Morrison's secret appointments to 5 ministerial portfolios while he was the Australian Prime Minister have been called legally valid, but they've also been sharply criticised for undermining the principles of responsible government. Australia's Solicitor General has given his legal opinion on the controversy, which has led to intense pressure on Mr Morrison to resign from Parliament. His successor, Anthony Albanese, today made public the findings in Canberra. He says the situation is unprecedented.
I think it's fair to say that what we're dealing with here wasn't envisaged. I don't think anyone in this room, certainly no one in the current government, sat around and said, I wonder if Scott Morrison has been put in charge of the Department of Industry, Science, the Department of Home Affairs, or whether he's made himself Treasurer. We have a Westminster system of parliamentary democracy that relies upon conventions, it relies upon accountability and checks and balances in the system. And those checks and balances have been thrown out by the former government.
While Prime Minister Scott Morrison secretly assumed 5 additional roles, he says they were necessary during the extraordinary times of the pandemic. Anthony Albanese says an inquiry will now be held, conducted by a legal expert, to work out why the arrangement wasn't made public. With more from Australia, here's the ABC's Dana Morse.
We have heard today that the Solicitor General has advised the Prime Minister that Mr Morrison's secret power grab essentially undermined good government. And while it didn't go necessarily against the Constitution, it did mislead the public. The Prime Minister has been asked today whether, when Parliament returns in September, if he'll support a motion of censure for Mr Morrison. Mr Albanese wouldn't be drawn on that today and says he won't deal in hypotheticals, but he did say that this is really unprecedented territory that the government is working in. There is talk of potential legislative reform here. The other thing that was included in this advice from the Solicitor General was ways to fix it in the future.
The ABC's Dana Morse there. Residential property markets around the world have been hit hard with supply shortages and post-COVID interest rate rises. In Australia, the building industry is in turmoil, with more home builders expected to collapse, leaving people with unfinished homes and big debts. It comes as the cost of material and labour continues to shoot up. The ABC's Naseem Kardim has more.
As builders go under, the dreams of would-be homeowners like Donna Taylor get shattered.
It's massive. It's heartbreaking. I'll be out of pocket $180,000 just to finish the build.
She was left with a rotting timber frame at her property in San Remo in Victoria's Gippsland region when Langford Jones Homes collapsed at the end of June, owing millions of dollars. The 53-year-old is now working 2 jobs and paying a mortgage as well as rent until another builder can finish the job.
There's so many more people that are like me that it's just ruined. And just feel like there's just no justice. I've just wasted 2 years waiting and I don't have the house that I wanted.
Since the end of last year, the list of builders going under has been growing as people rush to build more homes. Fuelled by pandemic support measures, labour costs jumped and prices for materials, including steel and timber, rose by more than 40%. Gold Coast developer and co-founder of ASX-listed Sunland Group, Sahel Abadian, feels the building collapses have just started.
I believe the second tier, third tier construction company will be very vulnerable. And I think the first tier construction company, they will survive, although maybe the margin will be smaller than what they thought it will be.
And with the benefit of 40 years' experience, he thinks the construction industry's woes have been driven by greed.
Everybody would like to have more and more profit, and for that, they increase the prices without understanding that ultimately it will backfire on every single part of the industry.
Harry Triggerboff, who's the founder of the large private developer Morrison, believes rising interest rates could cause further industry chaos.
I hope that as many as possible will remain, and I hope they learn not to work on such small margins. That is my advice to them.
Back in Victoria, the founder of Langford Jones Homes, Bruce Langford Jones, says consumers affected by the company's collapse are covered by warranty insurance. But Donna Taylor says she's only covered for 20% of the original contract price, and she's been left out of pocket because the cost to build has increased so much.
I just wish there was more out there to protect us, some sort of governing body that kept a closer eye on businesses before they went into all this debt, because it just doesn't seem right that we have to cop the brunt of it.
How's that? New Zealand cricket is threatening to pull stumps at New Plymouth's Pukekura Park, one of the country's best-loved provincial grounds. It says the facilities are no longer up to scratch, and it's given the council a year to fix things before the umpire's finger goes up. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Cricketing Bible Wisdom once voted the picturesque Pukekura Park among the 6 best grounds in the world. But now its days as a venue for first-class cricket appear numbered. Former Taranaki player Roger Stahersky, who was part of the Central District set up in the 1980s, says that would be a huge mistake.
Oh no, I'd be absolutely gutted. That would be a tragedy. It'd be terrible. The history of the place and just the difference of the place. I've played on a lot of grounds around the country that are just flat expanses of park, and I mean this is something just out of the box. It's brilliant.
Australia, England and the West Indies have all played at Pukekura Park. Stahersky concedes some of the facilities are a bit tired, a point echoed by Taranaki Cricket's General Manager Ryan Evans.
The message has been pretty clear that Pukekura Park isn't up to scratch, and so we're going to need to look at how we address that so that we can continue to bring cricket here, because at the end of the day it's New Zealand cricket's call where they'll choose to play cricket.
Evans, however, didn't want to speak to a series of bouncers fired off by New Zealand cricket in a letter sent as part of discussions about the council's long-term strategy for the park. In it, Head of Cricket Operations Richard Brewer criticised the size of the ground, changing facilities, dining areas, broadcast infrastructure and commentary positions, among other gripes, before adding,
due to the poor state of repair of existing facilities and the absence of key infrastructure, it's unlikely domestic cricket will continue to be played at Pukekura Park post the 2022-23 season, without a confirmed plan for future development and a commitment to providing suitable temporary facilities in the interim.
New Plymouth Mayor Neil Holdham says the tone of New Zealand cricket's letter came as a shock.
Yeah, well, their approach differs to what they'd communicated to us, was that there'd be an element of flexibility, and they understood that that council didn't have any funding set aside to upgrade the facilities, and that that ultimately would be a decision for the next council to take.
Holdham says it will be a pity if first-class cricket no longer comes to Pukekura Park, but ultimately that's a decision for New Zealand cricket. The prospect found few fans in New Plymouth.
That'll be a sad decision if it happens, eh?
Well, it's a pretty iconic cricket ground for the country, isn't it?
It doesn't faze me.
It would be really sad because it is one of the most picturesque grounds in the world.
Pukekura Park is wicked. It's such an awesome venue and the kids love to go.
It's a great venue. It's perhaps one of the best, most picturesque venues in the world, and we should be celebrating that.
Any high-cost improvements at Pukekura Park will not be included in any council budgets until the next long-term plan is approved in 2024.
Let us know your thoughts on that one. Pukekura Park had its day. 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A group in Christchurch is plotting a revolution against throwaway culture to help people maintain and fix their broken belongings. The Repair Revolution meets once a month in a community house in Richmond. Our reporter Rachel Graham went along to have a look.
In a back room, electricians Alan Lefting and Rudy Kremers are checking out a broken toaster. The cause of the toaster's problems was proving difficult to pin down.
It doesn't appear to be a mechanical fault.
Alan says that's the challenge that usually puts people off repair efforts.
Well, that's the beauty of what we've got here. Because we've got volunteers giving time, that the expensive part, the labour portion of the repairs, is no longer there. So, and we get parts donated and that sort of thing. So, and sometimes parts are quite a minor part of a repair.
In another corner, Grub McMasters is darning a rug with a hole in it. She says as well as offering to fix things for people, they also offer to teach the skill, like darning and sewing.
I think that's the wonderful thing about, the Repair Revolution, is that it's not just like you bring your items in to get fixed, like you can also learn how to fix your own things, and I really enjoy the empowerment.
Another volunteer, Vincent Raid, is looking at a broken mouse. He says such fixes aren't too difficult, but often people feel too intimidated to give it a go.
It's important to be careful and to do it slowly with the process and not use too much strength, because it's plastic and you can break easily the plastic. But if you use the right tools at the good moment, check online for tutorial, because we have a lot of resources online that help us to repair the stuff.
One of the organisers is Sarah Pritchett. She says they usually see household appliances, clothes in need of repair and knives needing sharpening. But she says they will give pretty much anything that can be brought in a go.
Someone brought in an oven one night and we had, two registered electricians working on it. It took them pretty much all night, but it was, a massive job, and it got fixed. Yeah.
Is that literally the biggest item?
Yeah, it is. I was a bit shocked when I saw it coming in. I was like, okay, yeah.
She says the main aim is to try and divert as much as possible from the landfills and to give people the confidence that they can try and fix things instead of just binning them and buying something new. The repair revolution is part of Repair Cafe Aotearoa, and they're pushing for New Zealand to get the right to repair in law.
If we had a global right to repair sort of measures, we'd be able to have spare parts for everything available for a longer period of time, manuals available to everyone. There wouldn't be the thing that you have to be an authorised repairer to get something repaired, so any repairer could repair things. There could be things like a requirement for durability and repairability labelling, which they have in France.
She says there are signs that the right to repair could be incorporated into the Waste Minimisation Act, which is currently under review. But she'd like to see something more comprehensive and standalone. The Christchurch repair revolution is just one of many around the country. And Sarah Pritchett says more and more people are realising that fixing stuff, instead of dumping stuff, can be good for the soul and good for the planet.
If you're listening to that one on radio, the video piece for Rachel's story will go onto our webpage. Really interesting. Evie, do you mend stuff or you do toss it?
Yeah, no, I do mend stuff, and there's a whole collection of stuff I've got at the moment on my laundry bench waiting to go to a repair cafe in Auckland if I get there.
Yeah, because I think the art of that, like darning socks, sewing, knitting, all of that kind of stuff.
It's the Donut Economics evolution. Donut Economics, Kate Rayworth, read the book if you haven't already, it's amazing.
Yeah, some of these things are dying out, and I worked out the other day that you can get ornaments fixed as well. There is a doll shop where you can go and take your, a doll doctor who'll repair your ornaments.
Oh my God, that place must be so creepy
Yeah,
after
it
dark.
is. There's all sorts of funny things in there. Anyway, whole other story. Let us know your thoughts on that one. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Do you keep stuff? Do you try and repair it? Or you're stuck in that cycle of just going out and getting something new? On Dr. Sharma, lots of feedback, most of it in the same vein. Message for Dr. Sharma, put up or shut up. Someone else says he's showing no evidence and just sounds more and more like a petulant toddler. Lisa, he should do the honourable thing and either seek endorsement through a by-election or resign, says Dean from Waipukaro. And this person says Mr Sharma seems to waffle and accuse with little or no evidence, defensive re his staff problems, says Sue. And another person says the thing that strikes me about Sharma is that he has no self-reflection.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The former Labour MP Gaurav Sharma is continuing to insist he has evidence of bullying within the Labour Party but is yet to share it. He was expelled from Labour's caucus today for what the Prime Minister calls his repeated and calculated breaches of the rules. Dr Sharma told Checkpoint that lots of people have been bullied but he wants to ensure their privacy is protected.
And that's why I'm saying, an independent investigation means that I'm able to provide all of that evidence while keeping people's privacy intact. And those facts are presented. And then those investigators can go and talk to these people themselves and check, is that true?
Gaurav Sharma says he has never bullied anyone, including his staff. The Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says Dr Sharma may now face further disciplinary action. She says Labour MPs agreed unanimously to refer the matter to Labour's New Zealand Council and President Claire Szabo. Meanwhile, Labour's Chief of Staff has released his response to the Ombudsman after Gaurav Sharma claimed new MPs were being taught how to avoid the Official Information Act. The Ombudsman, Peter Boscher, wrote to the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern seeking assurances about Labour's OIA obligations. Our political reporter, Annika Smith, has more.
In the letter, Raj Nana sets out the context and content of the panel discussion that Gaurav Sharma has claimed coached new MPs on how to avoid the OIA. Mr Nana says the allegations misrepresented the event, which was about the roles of the Labour leader's office and ministerial officers. He says the OIA was discussed after an MP asked about what information sent to a ministerial office is covered by the Act. Mr Nana says clarification was sought because MPs often manage sensitive information from their constituents.
Roads around Parliament are reopening after today's protest in the capital. Up to 2,000 anti-government protesters aligned to Destiny Church's Freedoms and Rights group gathered on Parliament grounds. They held a mock trial that found politicians guilty of the fictitious charge of crimes against humanity. Around 300 anti-protesters also attended. It's nearly 6 months since the police broke up the 23-day occupation, which ended in rioting and fires being lit. The police say today's These crowds have dispersed and there were no arrests or issuing of trespass orders. Officers will stay around Parliament to reassure workers, local residents and businesses in the area. The Deputy Prime Minister is supporting the precautionary approach police took. Grant Robertson says given the disorder at Parliament's grounds earlier this year, the police response today was sensible.
So far, I think the precautionary approach that the police have taken has been sensible. And as we've said a number of times in the last 24 hours, peaceful protest should be a part of our democracy. We just didn't have a peaceful protest in February and March, and so everyone's been very wary. So I hope the day ends with no trouble whatsoever, and that would be a good outcome for everyone.
Asked if he was guilty of crimes against humanity, Grant Robertson said, of course not. The Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, has formally resigned from the role and will officially bow out tomorrow afternoon. The Governor-General has accepted his resignation, which will take effect from 1:45 tomorrow afternoon. The current Deputy Speaker, Adrian Rudafe, is likely to replace Mr Mallard. Labour has made it clear Mr Rudafe was being prepared for the role for some months. Trevor Mallard will take up a diplomatic post in Ireland in January next year. Some highways in the top of the South Island are so damaged they'll not open before next week. Waka Kotahi says State Highway 6 between Nelson and Blenheim and State Highway 63 through the Waido Valley must remain closed for safety reasons and for damage assessment work. It says there'll be no quick fix because the scale of the damage is enormous. An update on both highways will be provided on Monday, but the agency says the situation could change rapidly with more rain forecast later this week. Meanwhile, more than $400,000 has been raised to support those impacted by last week's storm in the Nelson and Tasman districts. The Nelson Tasman Mayor Relief Fund has already received $300,000 from the government. Members of the public have donated $112,000, including one $10,000 donation. The Nelson City Council says it's really heartwarming and the Relief Fund is now open for applications. Off-peak rail passengers in the Wellington region will face longer travel times tomorrow. Metlink says buses will replace trains from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m, while unionised members of rail operator Transdev attend their annual union meeting. The delays will affect the Hutt Valley, Melling, Johnsonville, Kapiti and Waded Upper lines. Metlink General Manager Samantha Gain says passengers travelling during those times should allow extra time for their journey. She says Metlink will keep customers updated through its website, mobile app and social media channels. And Australia's Solicitor General says the secretive appointments to portfolios by Scott Morrison were valid but undermined the principles of responsible government. His successor as Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, says an inquiry will now be held, the ABC's Stephanie Dalzell reports. In sport, the All Blacks captain Sam Cane insists the pressure valve hasn't been released too much by their impressive win over South Africa in Johannesburg. The team are in Christchurch preparing for Saturday's test against Argentina. The New Zealand side broke a 3-match losing streak with their victory at Ellis Park. While the result has relaxed some of the scrutiny on the team, Cane says they know they can't rest on their laurels.
It's one performance, isn't it? So just because we got that one right doesn't guarantee we're going to get this one right. So there's plenty of work to go in this week as well. For us, it feels like it's just the start of where we want to get to, but it's a good stepping stone.
Meanwhile, first five Beauden Barrett has taken a knock at training today. The exact nature of the injury isn't yet known, but Barrett left training early and returned to the team's hotel to be assessed. Cricketer Ben Stokes continues to open up on his mental health journey, revealing he's still on anxiety medication after returning from a 6-month break. The England Test captain took the break after suffering a series of panic attacks following the loss of his father to brain cancer in late 2020. In a soon-to-be-released Amazon documentary, Stokes says while he's back playing, he's still speaking to his doctor and taking medication daily. And Manchester United fan protests against the club's owners have turned into a night of celebration after a 2-1 derby win over Liverpool in football's English Premier League. It gives United their first points of the campaign and lifts them to 14th and leaves Liverpool 16th, winless in their opening 3 matches. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's sex work. Perfectly legal these days, but how safe is it? For the sex workers, that is. We speak with Sherida from the Aotearoa New Zealand Sex Workers Collective and part 2 of Voices from the East. the remarkable story of June Taylor, teenager from Greymouth who ended up as one of the leading lights of Radio Tirana, the voice of communist Albania. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen momentarily. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. In the west from Northland to Wellington, also for Coromandel, Taumarunui and Taupo. Partly cloudy, isolated showers north of Taupo today, spreading elsewhere tomorrow. For the Bay of Plenty, Taihape and from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Partly cloudy with isolated showers today and possible thunderstorms in Gisborne. Fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine today. Partly cloudy tomorrow with a chance of showers from the afternoon. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy with isolated showers. Rain developing in Fiordland tonight and spreading north tomorrow, heavy at times. For Canterbury, fine today. Cloud about Banks Peninsula, becoming cloudy tomorrow with scattered rain developing from the afternoon. For Otago and Southland, fine with high cloud today. A period of rain spreading north tomorrow morning, followed by a few showers, mainly about the coast. And for Riekohu, the Chatham Islands, rain and low cloud today. Showers tomorrow, easing from the afternoon. The time is 8 minutes past 6. I'll update you with the latest headlines at 6:30.
Ngā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Actually, before we move on, I feel like I've just drawn all of myself with
There's
pen.
no pen there.
Okay, good.
I'll be going like this on you.
Okay, we can move back on to the serious stuff. Thanks, Evie. Donald Trump has asked a federal court to temporarily block the FBI from reviewing the material it seized from his Florida home 2 weeks ago. In a lawsuit, the former US president has also asked the court to appoint what's called a special master, usually a retired lawyer or judge, to act as a watchdog. Mr. Trump's lawyers say the document seizure is part of a plot to prevent him from being able to run again for president. The BBC's Chishi Izindu has more.
Donald Trump, first of all, outlays the historical events according to him, from when he left the office in January 20th, 2021, to the present day regarding these papers that are under discussion. So Donald Trump in this document then goes on to talk about the violation of his Fourth Amendment rights. That's what he's saying the FBI and the Department of Justice have done. And that Fourth Amendment talks about unreasonable searches and seizures of people's homes. And he's saying that's exactly what's happened. So he wants to defend that in this document. The four things he's asking for include that special master, an independent lawyer or judge to oversee the things that were taken from his home. The second thing he's asking for is more information and detail on the warrant that was released last week regarding what was taken from his home, because he's saying box number 11 is not enough information for him to know what was taken, because he's alleging that some of the information or some of the papers that were taken were privileged or potentially privileged documents. And therefore, the third thing he's asking for is the return of potential items that were taken from his home that were not part of the warrant. He mentions the removal of his passports as being one of those items. And then the last thing that Donald Trump is asking for is basically everything must stop. The FBI and the Department of Justice should no longer be reviewing the materials that it removed from his home until this order goes through. The Department of Justice has issued a statement basically saying they've seen this lawsuit and they will respond in court. Throughout this document, Donald Trump's team alleged that all of this is politically motivated. In fact, they use interesting language, like the Department of Justice simply wanted the camel's nose under the tent to rummage for politically helpful documents to prevent Donald Trump from running in the 2024 presidential election, which we must highlight. He actually hasn't said he's definitely going to do, but that phrase is peppered throughout this document. They are alleging that this is all to try and scupper not only that attempt to run for the 2024 presidential election, but also to try and potentially move the Republicans off the path of the upcoming November midterms as well.
The UK's cost of living crisis is deepening. According to the latest forecasts, the average annual household bill in Britain is set to rise by close to $7,000. And there are few signs the situation will cool. Inflation, which is already at 10%, could reach 18%. The state of the economy may be the biggest challenge facing the next Prime Minister, whether it's Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, to be announced in a couple of weeks. The BBC's Caroline Davies has more.
Pulling pints is no longer enough to pay the bills for Karen. She works full-time in a pub and lives alone in a one-bed bungalow. She's already £1,000 in debt because of energy costs.
It terrifies me. I mean, you can't find extra money. If you haven't got it, you haven't got it. So I don't know what happens. I don't know where to go or what to do. I mean, it's 2022. Someone who's working 40, 50 hours a week shouldn't be able to not turn the heating on.
Energy bills are expected to keep going up.
The reason the price cap is increasing is because it's becoming more expensive for energy companies to buy the energy they need. The wholesale price is increasing, and that's connected to worries about getting gas out of Russia. We can look at the gas prices over the recent few months. So back in spring of last year, you can see it was relatively flat, but since then there have been some dramatic peaks and increases.
Today, 3 energy company bosses called on the government to commit to a plan to help customers this winter.
The reality is customers are being asked to pay the price of gas, which is weaponised by Putin, and they shouldn't be expected to do that alone. Let's put it in perspective. The UK's energy bill is going from maybe 15 billion in a normal year to £75 billion this year. That's the equivalent of maybe 9 pence or more on the basic rate of income tax. No government would announce that, and in the same way, no government should let this go to customers.
Labour say they have a policy.
Our plan to freeze prices means inflation comes down by 4%. That's a big driver of many of these issues. So we want to resolve these issues. The government is sitting on its hands doing absolutely nothing.
The big decisions on how to give more help this winter are being left to the new Prime Minister, who won't be announced until the 5th of September. Liz Truss has said that she would help the cost of living by cutting taxes and introducing a temporary moratorium on energy levies. Her rival for the leadership thinks that policy won't work.
I think at a time like this, we've got to support the most vulnerable in our society, particularly people like pensioners who need our help. Now, those are my choices. Now, as you said, I'd love a tax cut, and who doesn't? But I think my priorities are the right ones for the country right now.
This winter will be very different to the last. The fear of rising costs is already leading many to worry about the dark nights ahead. They're looking for a guide as to how they'll make it through.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Russian military apparently has a big problem. 6 months after invading Ukraine, there aren't enough soldiers to fight and too many are dead or wounded. And so Moscow is putting out a call for more younger men to volunteer. The BBC's Will Vernon reports.
The town of Volosova, near St. Petersburg, is booming. Not the economy, it's the loudspeakers. Like many towns in Russia, Volosova has them installed on tall poles that line the main street. Traditionally, the loudspeakers are used to play patriotic music on holidays. But now they have a rather different function. The sound you can hear behind me is a message being played to residents. The voice is triumphantly announcing the creation of 2 volunteer battalions ready to be sent to Ukraine to fight in the war. And they're inviting local men to sign up. Now, this is a message that is being repeated up and down this country, on social media, on TV, on billboards. It's a large-scale recruitment drive for the Russian army. But the war divides local opinion. We should bomb them. I'd give them what for, this man said. If I were young, I'd go. It's too painful to talk about, this lady told me. Why go? Only their bodies will be brought back. So I'm just scrolling through some groups on Kaitaia, which is the Russian version of Facebook. And I can see here there are quite a lot of adverts for volunteer fighters. So there are some phone numbers here. Let's try calling one of the numbers. Да, здрасте. So I told the man on the recruitment line that I was interested in joining up. He said I'd potentially get a salary of around 200,000 Russian rubles a month, so that's about $3,300, as well as bonuses and various other perks. And the Kremlin is hoping that people will be tempted by that, because Russia needs more men. Western officials say up to 80,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded on the battlefield. Nina Chubarina wants to tell me about her son. She says Yevgeny signed up as a volunteer, was given a gun and sent straight into Ukraine. Days later, he was killed.
They just sent them in like dumb little chickens that hardly even held a gun before. They're cannon fodder. The generals think, we've got a volunteer, great, in you go.
Every day, state-controlled TV tells Russians their soldiers in Ukraine are professional, well-trained troops. The authorities have not released casualty figures since the end of March. But Nina Chubarina knows that large numbers are dying in Ukraine.
You read the news and it's all about men being killed. But people are going there. I don't know why they go.
Ukraine is strongly dismissing Russian accusations that it was behind the car bomb attack that killed the daughter of a prominent ally of Vladimir Putin. The Russians say a Ukrainian agent entered the country in July and planned the bombing. It's believed the bomb was meant for Daria Dugina's father. CNN's Brian Todd has this report.
It's still not clear whether Daria Dugina or her father was the target of the attack. The young lady was known as a rising star among far right-wing factions in Russia, to the point where she and her father had actually criticized Vladimir Putin for not being vicious enough in Ukraine. Daria Dugina was enough of a far-right Russian ultra-nationalist that shortly before her death, she claimed that the atrocities that occurred this spring in the Ukrainian town of Bucha, where innocent civilians were randomly slaughtered, were nothing more than American propaganda, despite the fact that camera footage and several eyewitnesses connected the killings to occupying Russian soldiers.
The American allegation goes much farther than anything I've ever heard before. Usually they just lay it onto the Ukrainians. But she was clearly a key anti-American figure, as her father was as well.
Both Dugina and her father, Russian philosopher and fellow ultranationalist Alexander Dugin, have been sanctioned by the U.S. for promoting Russian propaganda and disinformation. The U.S. Treasury Department says Daria Dugina was the chief editor for a disinformation website owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the influential Russian oligarch known as Putin's chef.
He's best known for the Wagner mercenary group. It's a very fierce and committing atrocities in various parts of Africa, but second best known for stoking anti-Western propaganda, for trying to intervene in Western political systems.
The 29-year-old and her father, analysts say, were so unapologetic in their promotion of Russian expansionism, such fervent backers of the Ukraine invasion, that they actually criticized the Kremlin for not being brutal enough in Ukraine.
It's a constant beat of you're not doing enough, you're not aggressive enough, you're not killing enough Ukrainians. That's a quote, right? Kill, kill, kill. Go further, be more aggressive, be angrier.
A friend of Dugina's told the Russian state news outlet TASS that he believed Dugina's father was the real target of the car bombing, since it was his car. Analysts say while Daria Dugina was not well known to the broader Russian public,
to those who watch the media, those who watch the production of ideology, she was a somewhat significant figure.
I think her star certainly was rising. She was pretty much stepping in to be the person who could take over her father's ideological empire.
Senior Ukrainian officials deny Russia's claim that Ukrainian security services murdered Daria Dugina. But in the wake of her death, several prominent Russian media personalities are demanding Russian military strikes against decision-making centers in Ukraine. One well-known TV personality saying, quote, "I don't understand why there are still buildings on Bankova Street in Kyiv," referring to the street that houses the presidential administration building and other official residences.
To China now, and it's experiencing one of its worst heat waves and droughts in decades. Falling river levels have meant hydroelectric power stations have been unable to produce enough energy, and people have been told to conserve electricity. The BBC's Catherine Da Costa has more.
China's record-breaking drought has scorched farms and caused some lakes and rivers to dry up. The Yangtze River, Asia's longest waterway, is now at record low levels. Officials say hydropower reservoirs are currently down by as much as half. At the same time, a surge in demand for air conditioning has put power companies under extreme pressure. This is Shanghai's famous skyline. The riverside Bund area, a popular tourist destination, now plunged into 2 days of darkness. Restrictions have been brought in to try and ease demand for electricity.
Large cities now consume a lot of electricity. Power generation provinces like Sichuan have been affected by the pandemic, and power generation has been affected. If our Shanghai government puts restrictions on consumption, it will help ease the supply of electricity.
In a harsh reminder of the devastating effects of drought, local news reports show fire trucks delivering water to villages in the central Hubei province as rural communities struggle to get by and crops have withered. Plunging water levels of the Yangtze River in China's southwestern region have revealed a trio of Buddhist statues believed to be 600 years old.
In the past, the water level was basically more than 3 metres during this season. I've been working for over a decade and I've never seen such low water levels.
After weeks of extreme heat, China issued its first national drought alert of the year last week. Some authorities in parts of central and southwestern China have turned to cloud seeding, an attempt to try and induce rainfall. There have been reports of rockets being launched into the sky carrying chemicals, but a lack of cloud covers stalled efforts in some areas. And there's no let-up in sight. A red heat warning, the highest level of alert, remains in place in large swathes of the country.
How good would you say your memory is? Well, sometimes, especially as we get older, we can forget the names of people we know or simply where we put our phone or glasses. Now, scientists in the US have found using minor electric shocks boosted memory for more than a month, and they say it could help treat illnesses like dementia. Here's the BBC's James Gallagher.
Our brain works by firing off electrical impulses. The team at Boston University used this in order to boost memory. They asked volunteers to wear a cap filled with electrodes, then used precise electrical currents to alter their brainwaves in 20-minute sessions of brain stimulation. These took place every day for 4 days, and the group's ability to remember a list of words was tested. The results, published in the journal Nature Neuroscience, showed improvements in memory lasted at least a month. The researchers were able to boost 2 types of memory. They improved the volunteers' long-term memory, which is how we can remember our first day at school, and also working memory, which is for the here and now, such as remembering what platform your train's on. The researchers are now investigating whether this technology can be used in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease when brain cells have already started dying, as well as in schizophrenia and obsessive-compulsive disorder.
NASA has given the go-ahead for the launch of the Artemis mission, its latest test flight to the moon. The mission is being heralded as the return of human exploration of the moon, and it's expected to lead to the first woman and person of colour to step foot on the satellite. The BBC's Rebecca Morrell has more from Florida.
After a 50-year gap, we're heading back to the moon, and it all starts here with the Artemis mission and NASA's huge rocket. It's called the Space Launch System, or SLS for short, and it's the most powerful rocket ever built by the US Space Agency. It stands nearly 100 metres, about 320 feet tall, roughly the same height as a 32-storey building. Its colossal size means it's really heavy, so it needs lots of power. It has 4 engines, but even those aren't enough to get this rocket off the ground. So what it also needs are 2 huge boosters. They all use fuel, and the biggest part, called the core stage, is full of fuel. In fact, fuel makes up 90% of the weight of this entire rocket. Now, you might be wondering where the astronauts will go. Well, it's near the top in the Orion crew capsule, but not this time. This is a test flight, so there are no people on board. The time has come to put the Space Launch System to the test. As it readies for blast-off from Cape Canaveral in Florida on Launch Pad 39B, the same one used for Apollo, it will be nerve-wracking.
3, 2, 1.
The rocket thunders away from the Earth, eventually reaching speeds of nearly 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometres an hour. As each component of the rocket completes their job, they separate. The Orion spacecraft is on its way. There's a long journey ahead. It's 380,000 kilometres, about 240,000 miles to the moon. After its launch, the spacecraft enters into a low Earth orbit. Then, with a go from mission control, the engines ignite, giving it the big push it needs to escape our planet's gravity. It takes several days to reach the moon, with the spacecraft making small adjustments along the way. At first, the spacecraft flies in close, 100 kilometres, that's 62 miles above the lunar surface. Then it enters a much larger orbit, swinging more than 65,000 kilometres, about 40,000 miles beyond the moon. That's further than any spacecraft built for humans has ever flown. During the several weeks Orion is in orbit, NASA will collect important data and check how the spacecraft is performing. Finally, after another close flyby, it's ready to head for home. Now, things get hazardous. As the spacecraft nears Earth, it has to enter our atmosphere at exactly the right angle. If it gets this wrong, it will burn up. So, its huge heat shield protects it while the temperature rises to nearly 3,000 degrees Celsius. A series of parachutes open, massively slowing it down, before splashdown in the Pacific Ocean.
Almost out of time, but some of your final thoughts now on New Plymouth's Pukekura Park and maybe saying goodbye to cricket there. This listener says, I've had the great privilege and pleasure of playing on and watching at Pukekura Park over 50 plus years, both nationally and internationally. It is regarded as a unique and iconic cricket ground. It is a treasure that must be saved, says Stephen. On the subject of repairing stuff, this person says, fixing my bike while listening to this. This is being done in Napier too. Another listener says, sustainable Napier. I got 3 things fixed last month. And someone else says, I repair things, sewing, mending, darning, electrical if possible, recycle fabric ends into toys. Now, our late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the evening. You can check out any of our interviews again on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. Nelson's clean-up causes headaches for schools as road closures keep students and their teachers at home. The principal of Nelson College is live on First Up. Do tune in, 5 a.m. tomorrow. We'll catch you a little later in the day.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Roads around Parliament are reopening after today's protest in the capital. Officers will remain to reassure workers, local residents and businesses. Many evacuated Nelson residents are able to return to their homes following property assessments. The former Labour MP, Gaurav Sharma, who was expelled from Labour's caucus today, says he's never bullied anyone, including his staff. And the Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, has formally resigned. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pacific Waves, delving deeper into the major Pacific stories of the week in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the region and the world. I bring you interviews with Pacific newsmakers, experts and commentators in their fields, as well as up-to-date coverage from our talented team here at RNZ Pacific and our correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves, 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.